The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
It is Friday, December 27th, 2019. This is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live to tape. Steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, Brooklyn, New York. Downtown Brooklyn. Whatever. Look, folks, I'm on vacation. Look at this. Casual Friday. I'm on vacation. I can barely even lift my head up. Although I did do the AM Quickie today. Check it out, amquickie.com. We have got, I can't even believe it, the show that we have for you today. Folks, this is one you're going to listen to over and over again, even though it's a best of. You listen to it for the 15th time. And here it is. First up, we're going to be talking to John Sides. He's a professor of political science at George Washington University, co-author of Identity Crisis, The Battle for Meaning of America. It's a fascinating book that really talks about the polarization that has taken place in this country, both under Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And here's a spoiler alert. Okay, to give you a sense of like what this is based around. Barack Obama is black. Donald Trump is white. And much of the polarization that is taking place in politics has to do with the racialization of just about every issue. Or vice versa. I'm not sure how that works. But you got to listen to the interview. Fascinating stuff. And then, because it's Casual Friday, and we just said like, oh, we can't decide. Do we play the David Feldman thing? Because that was hilarious. Or do we play the interview that I did with John Benjamin? Because that was awkwardly funny. It's Casual Friday. Oh, we struggle. What do we do? We got to go back and forth. But you know, we said, it's so casual, we're not going to decide. We're going to put them both in. That's right. It's a 3 for Friday. A free for Friday. A freebie Friday. So this is, I don't know. If you could take this podcast off your player and frame it on the wall, that's what I would tell you to do. But obviously you cannot do that. It's an audio product.
You can, I think there's a service that will print the waveform for you. So
there you go.
Just put it onto your wallpaper.
It could be your entire wallpaper. That would actually be pretty awesome to have if you were a genuine Majority Report fan, you would take this podcast, you would print out the waveform for what? This is going to be like a 2-hour, 3-hour thing. You print out the waveform and you use it to wallpaper like your fun room at your house or something. And what a conversation starter. Hey, Matt, great room. What is this waveform? Is this just some random waveform? Like it's not, it doesn't mean anything, right? And you say, no, actually, it is the waveform of my favorite best of episode of the Majority Report this year. Right there, you can see where David Feldman's saying something funny.
Everyone laughing at him.
Yeah.
You see the laughter.
And this is where it got really awkward between John Benjamin and Sam Cedar. And here's where John Sides was telling us something that we thought was really fascinating. So enjoy this. Don't forget, you can support the show by going to jointhemajorityreport.com and listen to the AM Quickie. You can do so by subscribing to amquickie.com. And also, if you get on the app at majorityapp.com, we got both on there. So enjoy this show. Here's John Sides, Follow Which by David Feldman, then by John Benjamin. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Professor of Political Science at George Washington University, co-author with Michael Tesler and Lynn Vaverick of Identity Crisis, the 2016 presidential campaign, and the battle for the meaning of America. John Sides, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start. This story of the 2016 election really starts closer to 2008, and I want to just start with one fact that just sort of blew me away, was that less than 50% of non-college educated white voters could could place the Democrats to the left of the Republicans on the question of which party was more supportive of government assistance, I guess broadly, help for African Americans. Is that right? And what are the implications of that at that time?
What that's showing you is of course, that lots of people just don't pay close attention to politics and don't register features of political parties that to most political observers are well known and have been well known for years, if not decades. The reason that this changes, though, has to do with the presidency of Barack Obama. And in some sense, Barack Obama clarifies the party politics of race. And this helps voters who may have been paying less attention to politics come to realize that the Democratic Party is to the left of the Republican Party on these issues.
That, to me, is stunning because there was plenty of I've seen studies that suggest that I guess the idea of government support becomes racialized right before this, but it's not lined up with the parties until essentially people see that a black guy is the Democratic nominee.
Yeah, especially for voters who had less formal education, the alignment of their partisanship and their racial attitudes really was a feature of the Obama era. And what that did, of course, overall was just to strengthen the correlation in the American population more generally, so that people who have views of immigration that are more favorable or want more immigration, or people that have views of racial inequality that think that it has mostly to do with slavery and discrimination, those people are increasingly Democrats. And if you have a view that is more concerned about the level of immigration and wants to reduce it, or if you have a view of racial inequality that says that it's mostly about blacks not trying hard enough or not working hard enough, then those people are increasingly Republicans. So maybe maybe people are changing their views about immigration to match their partisanship, or maybe they're updating their partisanship to align with their views of race and immigration. But either way, we end up with a country where the standard way that we contest elections, Democrat versus Republican, is now not just a debate about, let's say, how large government should be, which it has been for years and years and years. Now it's a debate about what kind of country we're going to be, how exclusive or inclusive we're going to be toward these different kinds of groups.
And I mean, in some ways, I feel that some of us here, speaking literally in this room, have been guilty of assuming that these things were already racialized, right? I mean, because race has played such an enormous part in our politics. But I guess so the big difference is really just sort of this new level of sorting that's taking place, right? That has been really basically an 8 to 10 year process.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there's no question that racial politics have been endemic in American politics from the founding. But the ways in which people's views about race and their own racial identities align with partisanship is a much more recent phenomenon.
And even like in the context of like the Dixiecrats and whatnot, and LBJ saying we're going to lose the South because of these issues for a decade. He turned out to be a little bit off, but even then, I mean, this is so it all comes down. Well, let's just start with this. I mean, where do you guys? I mean, tell us about the research that you did that you started to come across this notion. Did you enter into this work with an awareness that this dynamic had taken place?
Yes, I mean, in part because my co-author Michael Tesler had previously written 2 different books about the politics of race during the Obama era. One about his 2008 presidential campaign, and then a second book about not only his presidential campaigns but his presidency more generally. And we knew this was happening. And there's been a lot of attention in the political science literature to this concept of sorting and to the ways in which Democrats and Republicans, may increasingly differ from each other on a variety of policy issues. But what Michael was able to show in his work on the Obama era was that this sorting came to encompass racial issues as well as more general kinds of ideological issues. However, I think that this more general trend towards sorting may or may not have been as consequential in 2016 had it not been for the 2016 campaign itself. I mean, there was plenty of sorting already underway by 2012, but yet the role of issues like immigration and race in 2016 was clearly greater than in 2012, or that's what our evidence suggests. And that tells you that a lot of it had to do with the specific choices of the candidates in terms of their ideas and messages in 2016 and how those differed from other recent presidential elections.
Okay, so conceptually, to understand this, it's almost as if there was something like a dormant virus embedded in all of us, and the environment in 2012 or 2008 brought that to the fore, and then in 2012, it was a little bit less, the environment was a little bit less stimulating to that virus. And then in 2016, that virus or allergy or however you want to conceptualize it was even magnified because of the context. Is that sort of like conceptually the right way to think about that?
I think that's right. I mean, sometimes we talk about it with kind of an agricultural metaphor, which is, aspects of the Obama era kind of fertilized the soil for more racially charged politics, and that made probably increased the likelihood that that kind of racially charged politics could be potent if the candidates were to really embrace that. And Obama obviously didn't. He was always trying to moderate on questions of race. He didn't talk about it as frequently as some other Democratic presidents. He took very careful positions. McCain and Romney, really did not want to run heavily racialized campaigns and explicitly rejected certain kinds of tactics that might have played the race card in a more explicit way. But of course, for Trump and Clinton, it was a very different kind of election altogether.
All right. Well, let's talk about that in terms of, because my understanding is that Clinton found herself, relative from 2008 to 2016, the way that she was perceived on race and as reflected in her supporters almost flipped. Is that right?
Yes. Basically, of course, in 2008, her coalition was built around primarily white voters in the Democratic primaries, and especially white voters who had more conservative views on racial issues. And in 2016, it flips that now her coalition, she gains all this support among African Americans, loses some support among whites overall, and the role of white primary voters' racial attitudes just doesn't really matter as much anymore because there's no African American candidate on the ballot, and Clinton and Sanders are not really different in their own views about racial inequality. So yeah, it was basically a coalition that became the inverse of itself.
So how do you measure this stuff? Because 2008, it's not. We had our first black presidential candidate. We also were coming out of or entering into, the most severe economic event in generations. How do you sort of parse this stuff out? Like, how do you determine what is operative, because I imagine there's a lot of things that go into, the question of who am I going to vote for? How do you parse these out, and how do you determine what is the sort of the driving factor?
Sure. What we did in looking at the 2016 election was we did as many comparisons to recent presidential elections as we could, because we wanted to distinguish what is distinctive about 2016 from what is kind of a chronically important factor in presidential elections. In which case, if it's chronically important, then the story isn't really about 2016. It's just a broader story about American presidential elections. One of the ways that we did this was with a unique survey that interviewed the same group of voters first in the 2012 election. We talked to them in December 2011, so almost a year before they voted. We talked to them in November 2012 after they had voted, and we asked them, did you vote Obama or did you vote Romney? And then 4 years later, right after the 2016 election, we were able to re-interview those same voters. And so we could see, how they voted in both elections and who shifted from Obama to Trump or from Romney to Clinton. And we could compare the relative impact of their views about a variety of different issues that we had measured way back in 2011, well before, both campaigns, but especially 2016. And we found that it was these things about race and immigration that although in some cases they certainly appeared to correlate strongly with your choice between Obama and Romney, that those correlations increased in 2016. Other factors didn't necessarily show that same pattern.
How do you what are the type of questions that you ask to make that determination where you pull it apart?
Very good question. So we can break up a couple different topics. Take racial inequality. We're asking people whether they agree or disagree with a series of statements. And the statements are designed to get at, do you attribute racial inequality to structural forces like discrimination, or do you attribute it to the fact that, to your belief that blacks don't work hard enough? So generations of slavery and discrimination have made it difficult for blacks to get ahead. That's, do you agree or disagree? Or you may ask them, it's just a question of trying harder. If blacks would only try hard enough, they could be as well off as whites. Do you agree or disagree? So we asked those kinds of questions to measure views of immigration. It's in the three questions that we had in the survey when we first did it in 2011 were, do you want to increase or decrease immigration? Do you want to, or keep it the same? And then do you support a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants? And then thirdly, do you think that undocumented immigrants are benefit or drain on society? So, we combine these questions together to get, kind of indexes or scales that measure people's views on these issues. To do one more example, where there's a lot of discussion about the role of economics and economic anxiety. And so in both 12 and 16, this is now in a different survey project, but a really nice battery of questions. How worried are you about losing your job? How likely is it that you're not going to be able to make a mortgage or rent payment in the coming months, or not be able to make a health care payment? Several questions of that nature. So really designed to get at what I think people really thought were the driving insecurities, even after 8 years of economic recovery since the recession. And we just found that those economic anxiety measures really didn't strongly correlate with your vote in either election, 12 or 16, and didn't correlate more strongly in 16 than 12.
Were there significant differences in the way that people answered those questions? So you're asking the same people in 2011 that you are in 2016. Do their answers change at all? I mean, did you see any, did people become more or less, express more or less, I guess, racist views, or, however you want to?
Sure, very good question. Overall, no. There aren't really big shifts in people's overall views about immigration or race or things like that. One of the metaphors that we use to illustrate this, sometimes people talk about Trump's victory or the success of right-wing populist parties in European countries as a wave. It's a wave of populist sentiment. But if by populist sentiment you mean things like concern about immigration, there is no wave. It's not that the public was becoming less open to immigration, and that's what Trump was able to ride to victory. What we would say is that public opinion on questions like race and immigration and other issues is really more like a reservoir. There's a range of sentiments from positive to negative or favorable to unfavorable. And the question is, are those sentiments going to be mobilized and therefore become more powerfully predictive of people's choices? And again, that's where the decisions of the candidates come in.
So it's and let me ask the same question about the economic anxiety measures.
Sure.
Was there any movement from 2011 to 2016?
Yeah, the American public became less economically anxious, which again it's a mystery to me why this was so undercovered going into the 2016 election. But there have been 50 years of survey data that ask people things like, how are your personal finances doing? Are they getting better or worse? What about the national economy? Do you think it's getting better or worse? What about in a year from now? Do you think you'll be better then or worse off then? The standard battery of questions showed pretty clearly that the public was getting more economically confident. And again, this is just tracking the actual the recovery from the recession. It's not to suggest that every problem had been solved,
right?
But in terms of what the public was seeing, it clearly reflected a belief that the economy was getting better. And what's been remarkable to me is that since Trump's gotten elected, there's much more news coverage now about the economic recovery, the growth rate, the unemployment rate, people's positive views. Now the question is, why isn't the positive economy helping Trump or helping the Republican Party? But if you look at people's actual views about the economy, they're only a little bit better than they were in 2016. So again, I think in some sense the popular impression of the campaign really missed the boat on what was happening in public opinion overall.
And was that improved perspective on the economy, was that equally distributed across different income levels and wealth levels and all different sort of subgroups that you would look at?
Very good question. So the answer is yes. That you can segment the public based on how much formal education they have. You can segment them based on their income level. And the trends are moving in parallel. So every group, every educational group and income group is becoming more favorable about the economy. And in fact, the ironic thing about the comparisons across the income groups is that during the Obama years, there were actually fewer differences between the wealthiest and the least wealthy Americans in their views of the economy. So in some sense, the income differences shrank during Obama, far from it being the case that they were growing because the wealthy people thought the economy was doing much better, but the poor people thought it wasn't. The only really thing that differentiates people's perceptions of the economy overall is just partisanship. And, Democrats and Democratic-leaning people were much more likely to perceive that economic growth than Republicans because the Republicans didn't want to give credit to a Democratic president. And this kind of partisan bias in economic perceptions is a pretty chronic feature of contemporary American politics. So if you wanted to find the really angry people or the so-called economically anxious people, it was really Republicans tired of being out of the White House for 8 years. It wasn't due to social class or income or anything like that.
And much of your research suggests that race or that party becomes a surrogate for racial questions. Is that right? I mean, is that
yes?
Okay, so yeah, so explain that to us.
The party becomes a surrogate for
the racial views that you have. That the more things become racialized. I mean, so just even getting back to the immigration point you were making. People had the same feelings towards immigration. It's just that they didn't realize they could express them in the political arena. Is that like a way of conceiving it?
I may maybe put it slightly differently. I mean, they express them. I mean, they'll tell you their views. I mean, at least if you believe survey data. But again,
but you can't act on them. You can actually act on them within the context of politics, and they didn't understand that before?
Well, I mean, I think from the standpoint of social science, right? There's a lot of different ingredients that can go into my choice between a Democratic and Republican candidate, and we know that partisanship is always going to be a factor, and it was a strong factor in 2016. as it has been in previous elections. But the question is, other factors, well, it depends, right? It depends on, first of all, what are the candidates talking about? Are you getting enough information to think that this is an important issue? What positions are the candidates taking? If they're taking the same position, then it doesn't really help you choose to think about that issue because they're not, they're carbon copies of each other. So again, what I think makes a difference for voters is to see, first of all, a lot of discussion about an issue, which brings it to the top of your head and makes it a more salient part of your thinking, and then to see the candidates sharply differ on that question. And so what you saw in 2016 that was different than 2012 or 2008 was both this sort of extraordinary emphasis on all of these issues tied to race, ethnicity, and immigration, and also very, very sharp differences between Trump's positions, of course, which attracted controversy for the entire duration of the campaign, and Clinton's positions, which we argue were to the left of Obama's, probably, and more generally, of course, she was structuring her entire campaign in many ways as a rejection of Trump. And so I think if you were a voter, now you had a very clear contrast on an issue that was being discussed more frequently than it had been. So that's what makes your own views about immigration now become activated and a more important influence on your choice.
I see. So as I grow older, I may think that, tax deductions for mortgages on homes are more important than I did when I was, 22, I guess. But in this instance, it is outside of me. That remains a constant, and suddenly the candidates are talking about tax deductions on home mortgages and how important they are, and I may become more attuned to it at an earlier age, just for example.
Yeah, and it's not to say that people don't make choices based on factors that are, kind of intrinsic or idiosyncratic to them.
Right.
I certainly also care a lot more about the mortgage interest deduction than I did 20 years ago. And it's not to say that we can reduce people's choices in 2016 or any election to one factor or one set of factors. But what I would typically say, again, is if we want to see what is distinctively important about voting behavior in one election as opposed to other elections, right, that a lot of that's going to depend on the choices and the messages of the candidates.
And this is and this was one of those things that was different than the other, essentially, is what stuck out. And so, all right, let's talk about Muslims, because during the Bush administration, we've actually had in the past couple of years, and maybe really, starting, well, I think you know this, during the Obama years, it was sort of, it was upsetting, but also fascinating to see that during the close proximity temporally to 9/11 did not provide more hate attacks against Muslims. It was really, as we got further out, it was basically Obama in some way energized Islamophobia. Is that what your data shows? I certainly feel like I experienced that way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Michael Tesler talks about in his work on the Obama era in particular is that views of Muslims became more associated with views of Obama than was true for other candidates or that had been true in the past. And part of this probably reflects the idea that some people perceived Obama himself or suspected he was a Muslim. And we could show in the chapter that this may help explain why Democratic and Republican voters are now further apart in their views of Muslims and Islam than they once were. So in some sense, Islam and Muslims is another issue on which the parties are now better sorted. But then again, here comes 2016 and shows that we can have a campaign that activates your underlying views of Muslims more so than was true even in the Obama era. And this, of course, is largely due to the fact that Trump targeted Muslims and suggested we needed new policies to deal with travel and to deal with homeland security. And He's widely criticized for those views, including within his own party. But again, it makes the contrast between him and Clinton starker, and it brings that issue to the forefront of people's minds in ways that it might not have been.
Let's talk about the how Trump acted upon those from, I guess, the center to the left, sort of in an inverse way to Obama. I mean, so if Obama basically activated people's pre-existing racial biases and Islamophobia, Trump has sort of done the opposite for people who had maybe a reservoir of less discriminatory. How would you express that?
Well, I think what you're pointing to is a really important trend that's happened during, but especially since the 2016 campaign. And what we've observed in public polling data is a remarkable leftward shift of Democrats on these issues. Really, I mean, in a very short amount of time, 2 to 3 years, we're talking about 15-point or even 20-point increases in the percentage of Democrats who, express a favorable view of immigrants, increases in the percentage of Democrats who attribute racial inequality to discrimination. We're also seeing, I think, a similar sort of partisan difference in views of Islam. It's always the case that public opinion reacts against presidents. I mean, it's kind of a chronic feature. The president sort of tries to shift policy in one direction, and the public goes in the other direction, almost as a reaction. But what's happened, in particular under Trump, is a shift on these issues that are the bread and butter of his presidency, which are the ones that have to do with race and immigration. And that's done is it's pushed Democrats and Republicans even farther apart. Now the parties are even better sorted than they were. And so, in the aggregate, it looks like Americans are turning against Trump. But in what that conceals is that it's mostly the movement of Democrats. And so that's kind of what makes the identity crisis that we use in the title of the book even more intense, because now you can really see even more reasons why there could be intense partisan conflict on these issues.
So how much, I mean, if there was some type of baseline, right, if we're starting at zero and the Obama pushes or activates, however you want to contemplate that, the sort of the racial biases of certain people, I want to say on the right, but, it's also some Democrats too, right? But on the right, I guess, of the racial scale, how much further did they move from zero relative to Democrats moving the other direction from zero? Do you know what I'm saying? Like we're creating more polarization, but
Yep.
Both parties, if there are two separate parties here, are moving to their respective corners. What was the distance that they traveled to those corners? Yeah,
that's a very good question. And now I have to retreat into a very sort of carefully caveated social science kind of answer. It depends on the specific kinds of questions that you're looking at, whether Democrats have moved farther to the left or Republicans have moved farther to the right. I think on questions of immigration, I think the movement of the Democratic Party has been more notable and perhaps sharper. But I think if you looked at other questions, depending on the exact polling question you're looking at, you might see the opposite pattern, or you might see roughly parallel kinds of movements. So both parties are moving a similar distance. For that reason, I think we're fairly careful in not trying to say that this sorting or polarization is primarily due to movement in one party or the other. I think it's some of both, and which one looks to be moving further really just depends.
Do you have a list of what policies have become racialized for both corners, as it were?
I mean, anything that almost anything that is connected to African Americans connected to immigration will show these partisan differences.
Well, I mean, I know the differences, but I mean, because it seems like what happened was under Obama, like we started off with, you had whites without a college education come to realize that certain programs were associated with with black people, and their attitudes, their racial attitudes, kick in, and they say, well, "I don't want to be I don't want to vote for a Democrat because I didn't realize that's where my money's going to." I get the sense under Trump, for instance, like that housing for the right has become even more racialized. And maybe it happened during Obama, but I get the feeling it was more racialized, and that I don't necessarily see the left as conscious about housing as a racial issue. I mean, do you have a sense of questions like that? I mean, maybe it is. I don't know, but that's just I'm just trying to sort of draw a distinction there to see if there's anything in your data, in your research that suggests dynamics along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think exemplifies what you're talking about is something that we refer to as racialized economics. And it's the idea that people are thinking about economic outcomes and then therefore like the government policies that affect people's economic outcomes through a racial lens. So it's not that I'm economically insecure and therefore I vote this way or that way. The really more potent perception is that my group, typically defined in terms of race and ethnicity, is losing out to those other racial groups who are getting unfair help and are not playing by the rules. And so a lot of government policies then become viewed as a sort of implicitly racial policies if they're perceived as helping undeserving people get ahead. And I think typically, especially for means-tested programs, housing, sure, if we're talking about like federal housing assistance for the poor, or if we're talking about any kind of social program that primarily seeks to benefit lower-income Americans, the risk is always in American politics that these policies are viewed as essentially, primarily benefiting racial and ethnic minorities who, are just living off the government and not working hard enough and trying hard enough on their own. And I think something about, certainly nothing about the 2016 campaign, changed this in any form or fashion as far as I could tell. I feel like there was still this sort of constant division, particularly in Trump's rhetoric between, the us, the good people, and the them. And the them often had an implicitly or explicitly racial or religious character. And so, again, to the extent that we're going to frame government policies in those terms, it's going to be, of course, increasingly difficult to reach any kinds of, agreement on those policies. And when
we're talking in generalities, but specifically, it's like white people saying, "I don't want people of color to get this stuff," right? I mean, it doesn't quite go the other way.
Some of the interesting ethnographic work that was done, and even this is before the 2016 election, definitely talking to certain groups of white Americans found exactly that perception. So one book that got a lot of attention a couple of years ago was by a sociologist named Arlie Russell Hochschild called Strangers in Their Own Land. And she went to rural Louisiana and she talked to folks there. And what she found was that they had a story that they kind of was embedded in their consciousness. And the story was, in a metaphorical sense, is I'm in line to get what I deserve, and I've worked hard, and I've played by the rules. But look what's happening up ahead of me in line. Hey, who are those people? They're cutting in line. These are African Americans who benefited from affirmative action, or these are undocumented immigrants that wouldn't wait their place, and came into the country anyway. And so I think one of the challenging things that comes out of the 2016 election, but it's clearly endemic in a lot of people's political attitudes, especially among whites, is that there's always a zero-sum game here, where I'm doing the right thing and I'm not getting ahead, and the reason I'm not getting ahead is because they're taking it from me. And I think one of the real, nothing about the 2016 campaign makes this any better. And one of the real challenges about having a more racialized politics going forward is to try to figure out a way that we can have conversations around issues like this without having them inevitably viewed as a competition between different racial groups.
Well, what if the solution to that is to just make sure there's no line? Like, I mean, what if, would these people, if these people were feeling like I'm not in line, I got to the front because it turns out there was no line. It was just like one very wide window where everybody could just walk up and get it. Do we have a sense of what would happen in that instance?
Yeah, it's almost it's a politics that's difficult to convey.
It's universal, right? Like, I mean, it's not. I mean, it's a universality. Like, this is available to everyone. We're not going to ask you.
That's why the politics of Social Security and Medicare are somewhat different, because those are, universal benefits for seniors. But of course, it's impossible to make all these. It's a challenge to make all these benefits universal. And so I think. Basically what I think is important is to make clear that I think my version of what you're saying, there's no line, is to say that to people, and this is what politicians have to try to communicate, that the challenges that you feel that you're facing are not because of other groups. That's not who you should be attributing your own challenges to. We have to find a way to sort of sever this perception that maybe I'm not getting ahead the way I want to, or I'm not achieving what I want to achieve, from this perception that the reason for that has to be those undeserving groups over there. If we can sort of sever that link, that would be helpful in terms of, I think, of changing the way that we have conversations in and around economic security and government social policies.
I mean, I wonder if it's even if it's possible for humans ever to not blame someone else for what they feel they don't have, or they haven't gotten that they deserve. I guess the argument about that that we heard, I think particularly in the context of like the Clinton and Sanders race, was sort of centered around this idea that, like, well, you can try and sever that cause, that a sense that it's the fault of immigrants that you're not getting this, or it's the fault of black people that you're not getting this, or you can just try and give everybody more so that they don't even have to blame anybody. I mean, putting aside whether or not it is feasible from a practical standpoint, I'm talking from a hypothetical standpoint. Sure. Just in terms of social attitudes, if one is addressing who I'm going to blame, the other is addressing the beef. Right?
Yep. I think that offers an avenue. I think you're right, to having a different kind of conversation around these issues. Of course, the risk, the challenge, it seems to me, is that kind of Bernie Sanders universal argument. The question is, again, whether that's going to be met with a demagogic appeal, that's going to portray a universal policy as fundamentally a secret handout. Because my observation about the way that these debates unfold is that oftentimes, even policies that might have real benefits for, let's say, lower-income white people get portrayed as fundamentally policies that benefit African Americans or other racial and ethnic minority groups. So the question is, can you win with a universalist argument if you have to match it up against that counter-argument? And that's like a real challenge. But I would say that one of the things that we talk about at the very end of the book, we have this somewhat glimmer of optimistic note, but it's really just a glimmer, is, we talk about the fact that some of the racialized politics that we observed in 2016 was due to the choices of the candidates and to the choices of political leaders more generally. And so if we're going to have any kind of politics where some of these issues, I don't know what you'd say, there's just a de-escalation, right? So that it doesn't feel so emotionally charged and fraught. It's going to have to come from political leaders making different kinds of appeals and finding ways to articulate, policy attitudes and policy proposals that don't stoke this kind of group competition. So, I mean, if it's going to change, it's going to change in part because politicians decide they want to do it differently. I'm not confident that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well,
but that's what we think. That's one of the things that we think was really what made 2016 distinctive, and it's what might make a subsequent election not quite as fraught as 2016.
If I was looking at your book and I had the ability to choose, and I don't want to, I know this is sort of maybe an unfair question, but it'll be the last one, and you can. But if I was looking at these attitudes and seeing what your data says, that maybe like the Obama to Trump voters were at the very least, in part pushed by this notion of Clinton's talking about race more than Obama did, and Trump is speaking to my pre-existing biases, and I'm going to go that way. Demographically, would it be how risky? How much has things changed? Where it would be that if an African American went up against Trump, like what would that look like? Would it be a function of because Obama was less racial in terms of what his programmatically, at least what he would rhetorically than Clinton. So maybe that's not fair, but to put it that way, but it did. Just the existence of a black guy drove the Trump base sort of, I don't want to say crazy, but more crazy. So what?
So the question is ultimately, could this change?
Well, I mean, have attitudes changed enough that maybe we're past that danger point, or or are things? Did we see some of that play out maybe in races in 2016, in 2018? I mean, where are we in terms of the American public relative to our susceptibility to these new factors, i.e., a guy like Trump coming out and getting highly racialized, and an African American who doesn't?
That's a very good question. I'm not going to give you a very optimistic answer. I don't know that we've gotten. I don't know that we've sort of passed the maximum level that we could imagine in terms of the racialization of our politics, or having a more emotionally charged politics around issues like race and immigration. I thought maybe we had maxed it out in 2012 and 2008 because we had an African American on the ticket, but it turns out that we didn't. In 2016, it was even more so. And 2018, same thing. We did some analysis that looked at voters in 2018 compared to 2014, 2012, and their views of immigration were now more strongly related to how they voted for Congress than they were in those two prior elections. So this is happening even in a midterm year when Trump's not on the ballot. So part of me is not sure that we're going to be able to back away from this anytime soon, given what the nature of Trump's views and the way he's basically, I assume, going to continue to run his presidency and candidacy. And based on my perceptions of where Democrats are going to come from in opposing him, I think the contrasts are going to be pretty stark. So, that's not the most optimistic note to end an interview on, but it really feels to me like the conditions are still quite ripe for a continuation of what we would call the identity crisis.
John Sides, thank you so much. Fascinating work. Congratulations on it. The book is Identity Crisis, the 2016 Presidential Campaign and the Battle for the Meaning of America. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it.
Majority Report Casual Friday. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is the host, the illustrious host of the David Feldman Show. He's also a comedy writer, stand-up comedian. You've seen his work in any number of television outlets. He's written for all sorts of people, including people that I make fun of on a fairly consistent basis. David Feldman, thanks for being here.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. I'm assuming Matt, Brendan,
Okay.
Can you guys hear DF?
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so I just have to keep this short because I'm doing Sam Cedar's show today.
Really?
So, until they call me, because I'm expecting a call from Sam Cedar. So the minute he calls, I have to hang up. But I love your show. So.
Yeah, you like sort of A for effort kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David, you had a couple requests for me before we came on. You wanted to, and people are jonesing over this, but I guess we'll get to that later. But you had something that you wanted to say about Ben Shapiro. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with everything he stands for,
right?
In principle,
In principle,
But in principle, here's the thing: I watched the clip of his walking off that BBC interview, and I'm opposed to this man in principle, but I think he realized if you watch during that interview, it dawns on Ben that he's talking to somebody from England, and he walked off because he didn't want to violate the Logan Act.
So in other words, okay, so I'm assuming because the Logan Act is in the news because Donald Trump has accused John Kerry of violating the Logan Act. And you think what actually happened is that Ben Shapiro is so, as the New York Times called him, the cool kid's philosopher, he's so acute intellectually that he thought to himself, wait a second, I'm BBC, British government, who funds it? That's a public broadcast. Logan Act, I got to get out of here.
He's in violating of I think it's called the Logan Paul Act. I don't know. I studied this kind of stuff.
Did you, so he wasn't having a temper.
Deep into the weeds.
Okay, but we won't get into the weeds. But in other words, he wasn't having a temper tantrum. He was just trying to obey the law.
There is a law on the book, and I get. I don't want to come off as too esoteric, and because I know you're a big picture guy. You don't get into the weeds on minutia, but it's actually called the Logan Paul Act. And it outlaws YouTube celebrities from trivializing suicide. So it's the Logan Paul Act, and Ben he does not want to trivialize suicide the way Logan Paul did. It's against the law.
Did you think?
By the way, I have a comedy writer. If I could work for Logan Paul, I would be so happy. He's the voice of a generation.
Oh, thank you. Did you think when you were coming up in show business that one day there would be a way to build like a pundit profile for yourself? Not just a pundit profile, but a pundit profile as like a preeminent conservative intellectual by humiliating 19-year-olds in college campuses and then getting them clipped up for the internet? Did you anticipate that?
Well, I used to humiliate college co-eds when I was in college, but I didn't know you could make money doing that.
You had no idea.
I never.
By telling them that they were stupid, that you could get clipped and get paid by oligarchs to give talks.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get paid playing video games.
Right.
I'm looking into that.
Did you see the ad that Delta did? They encouraging their people not to join a union because for their union dues they could buy a game console.
Listen. You know that I am pro-union in principle, right?
In principle, yes.
In principle, yeah. But the labor movement is only about 150 years old. We have to go slowly on this,
right?
So, and Delta, yes, theoretically, in principle, I would love my stewardesses and my pilots to have health care because, I don't want them to crash the plane. In principle, I don't want them to crash the plane. But we have to be adults, okay?
So, David, I'm sensing a theme here with this in principle and, sort of abstract goals versus concrete actions, and it's disturbing me because I thought that you were a Bernie supporter, but you sound to me like you might be switching sides here to someone like Biden or Buttigieg.
No. Oh, no, come on now. I love Bernie.
Okay, good.
I love Bernie in principle. I and you know me. We've had you know
yes.
that my heart bleeds when we talk about socialized medicine and the 60,000 Americans who die each year because they're underinsured. You've seen my eyes well up.
Yep.
I care.
Yep.
You know that. But right now, we need to put everything on the back burner and defeat Trump.
Oh.
Now is not the time to worry about the 33% of American children who are food insecure, or that we have only 11 years before the planet is destroyed. We have a constitutional crisis, and those only come around every 3 years. This is a constitutional crisis because we have to stop everything to figure out what the subpoena power is of the House Judiciary Committee. Because if Jerry Nadler cannot have Mueller testify before the House Judiciary Committee, everything will fall apart. The whole world will come crashing down.
Yeah.
And we have to be adults.
Right.
And put everything on the back burner and focus on defeating Trump. Not impeachment, just defeating Trump.
Well,
and then we can focus on the important stuff.
Right. Naturally. I mean, I think that you're reflecting certainly that sounds like the opinion of most of the Democratic leadership. But I'm confused by this, David. And, I think we have a little bit of a different perspective on this. But I'm genuinely confused because I'm totally we have to defeat Trump and also make sure that the food supply stays on Earth. And, and those 33% of children that are food insecure, we need to take care of immediately. We can't backburner it.
Yes.
So that's why I'm voting for Sanders. But that being said, I don't.
You can't win. I don't mean to interrupt you. You can't win.
Can we get to that in a second?
Win.
Can we get to that in a second, though? I disagree with you, but I want to talk about why can't Congress? And I'm serious, David, because I don't spend any time talking about Mueller or any of this stuff. But it seems to me that regardless of what you think of Russia or blah blah blah, that Donald Trump has broken the law repeatedly. Mnuchin is ignoring Congress. Barr is ignoring Congress. Why, if this actually is a problem, why can't they impeach him today instead of all of these telephone games that they're playing all the time? Explain that to me.
Okay. First of all, we're on the same team, right? So we're not going to do the circular firing squad here,
sure.
Because the last thing we want is the Democratic Party to hive off into separate little groups and not show up on Election Day to defeat Trump. So let me just say up front, and my eyes are welling up right now, and you know that I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. So we're on the same team,
right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and again, I love Bernie, and I believe in everything this man stands for in principle. So let me talk to you about why you can't impeach.
Okay. Why can't we impeach?
You can't impeach because we're a nation of laws, and the American people need to be taught a lesson that nobody is above the law. That's why we can't impeach. That's why. That's why Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman are going to prison. Not that their crimes were that bad, but we have to set an example and remind the Americans that everybody has to play by the rules, including Congress. And Trump has to go. He has to be defeated by the American people, but the Democrats have to play by the rules. And the rules are Democrats don't do anything.
Until, or
You
what is
have
it?
to obey the rules.
So the rules are is that what Elijah Cummings meant, Congressman Elijah Cummings, when he said the American people need to wake up? And he said that yesterday. And some of us were a little bit like, I thought, didn't we give the Democrats congressmen?
Yes, to be reminded of what makes America great. To
In
tell
principle?
us, in principle, but to actually go through an impeachment, that will alienate the vast swaths of Americans who don't think impeachment is right.
Right.
We have to worry more about what the crowds think, what the mob thinks, and the rule of law. Which, this is like, I don't mean to get esoteric and in the weeds with you, because
right.
I know you're a big picture guy.
I'm what they call, I'm an ideas man. Really,
yeah,
I don't like to talk about people. I like to talk about ideas.
Yeah. And believe me, no, I would like to take Donald Trump out into the, back behind the schoolyard and, punch him. Believe me.
Right.
I'd like to knock him out. But no, you got to be adults. You got to be adults.
So every poll suggests that Bernie Sanders is one of the most popular politicians in the country, and that he runs well head to head with Donald Trump. I wouldn't necessarily put too much weight into any poll at this time, but I will. He's one of the only people in American politics that has stayed steadily positive with a lot of exposure, and the sights of the Democratic establishment and the Republicans all reining in on him. Why do you think he's unelectable?
Well, I think he's clearly unelectable. The polls, go to his rallies.
Okay.
Have you been to any of his rallies?
Yes,
Because, we're trying to, you can't win unless you get those white, working man, male Democratic moderates.
Right.
You can't win an election without them. And if you go to a Bernie rally, it's very threatening to ordinary Americans. The crowds are way too big. They're very boisterous, enthusiastic.
Right.
Did you see Bernie at the town hall on Fox News? If that wasn't a reason not to vote for him, because he does something to an audience. He won over the town hall, the Fox News town hall, and that's very threatening to Democrats like me who live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And you cannot win an election without appealing to us.
Right.
It's
right.
almost demagogic the way he tells people not only what they want to hear, but what they actually need.
Right.
You can't win an election by appealing to the American people's actual needs. That's not what Democrats do, and we have to obey the laws. There are laws. Democrats just are nostalgic. That's all.
Right. So in other words, if you're making, like, say you're making under $40,000 a year, and maybe you're working 2 jobs, maybe you're about to lose a job, and you're in Pennsylvania.
I don't want to hear about that. I know. I don't want to hear about that.
Right. You wouldn't want to hear about that, but maybe that person. But who knows? Maybe the preoccupations.
Are there people like that?
I think there's a lot of people like that. Yeah, I think even if you walked, even to this day with all the gentrification, you could walk, I don't know, 20, 30 blocks up from where you are and find some people really catching a lot of hell on the Upper East Side.
Okay, so just help me out here because I'm a details guy. Okay. I talk to Rob Reiner a lot, and I don't want to lord my relationship with Rob Reiner over you because we really get into policy. When you say $40,000 a year working 2 jobs,
right?
That doesn't qualify as middle class, as I understand it, right?
Well, I think I think you might. I don't know what the number is, but I know that the official government numbers on a lot of these things are actually not very generous. So I don't know.
Well, all I know is
I don't know what officially
puts
you.
Joe.
Okay, you're going for. Okay, yeah. So why do you think that Joe Biden, because again, I noticed with the taking Donald Trump behind the school, that was a Joe Biden line. So clearly you've been imbibing Biden. Why do you think Joe Biden is the right way to go? What makes him the most electable?
Because he's middle class.
Right.
And you can't win the election without appealing to the middle class. And, Bernie is focusing on, the lower classes. And that's not what the Democratic Party is about. We're about the middle class, not the 150 million Americans who can't scrape up $500 in case of an emergency. I get that. 150 million Americans, nearly half this country, can't find $500 without going into debt. That's not who we're going after. We're going after the middle class. Eventually, I'm concerned. And look, I don't know if this is the phone, but my eyes are welling up right now when I think about those people. And I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
So I can relate pain and suffering. You know that I can relate to pain and suffering. My son fell in love with a widow in my. Anyway, I don't even want to get into. But I can relate to pain and suffering, but I'm middle class.
Right.
I made a lot of money, but I'm middle class in my thinking, and it's incrementalism. We'll work our way down. Let's just start with focusing on the middle class, and then we'll work our way down to starving children in America.
Sure.
But let's do it incrementally, and that's what I love about Joe Biden. He's an adult.
He's definitely certainly an adult. When you think so I think we just have a disagreement about what we need to take care of and how fast we need to take care of things. But you said earlier, and even the middle class, because
Hey, it's not me. It's Rob Reiner.
So
Rob
tell Rob Reiner about the barbell economy. But I don't want to get into the weeds.
The barbell economy.
It's the idea that it's all, and it's probably not even a great image because there's way more on the bottom, obviously, than at the top. But the idea is that the weight is at the top is on two sides, and the middle there's nothing in the middle. The middle is just the bar.
What's the hockey stick?
I don't know. That's a climate change.
I like
thing.
the hockey stick.
Well, the
hockey stick is climate change.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because you yourself said earlier that we might have 11 years to keep the Earth inhabitable for people, frankly, like your son, and I don't know how old the widow is. But Joe Biden today apparently is announcing a centrist plan on the climate. Does that really sound like something that's going to keep the Earth alive?
You have to reach across the aisle and negotiate with carbon dioxide. Otherwise, it's not going to work with you. And Joe Biden has a history of reasoning with climate change. That's how we defeated Hitler. I mean, I know, you lose the argument when you bring up Hitler, but we defeated Hitler. We sat down with him and said, we're reaching across the aisle, kill 6 million and stop there. You negotiate. It's all a numbers game. That's what Joe will do.
So if Joe Biden was president in the 30s, he would have offered the 6 million deal for Hitler.
He would have gone in low.
Is that what Rob Reiner said?
And he would have said Hitler's a decent guy.
Right.
That's all. That's the key to all of it.
Was Hitler middle class?
Come in. Hitler was middle class. Yes, very bourgeois in his thinking.
Right.
But don't get me started on that because you just had a guest on. I don't about socialism. Hitler was a socialist. So I don't want to get in there. It's in the name Nazi. Right. It's an acronym. I don't want to get too smart for you because I'm lording my supreme intellectual knowledge over you. Right. But I was watching Ladder with Crowder, and he told me that Nazi means socialism.
Right.
So he was a socialist.
Well, I can't argue with that. I don't have. So just
listen. Let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hang on.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to be a bully. and because I'm trying to bring everybody into the tent. Okay.
Right. Right.
And
in principle,
and I'm welcoming. And am I being likable here?
Very.
Am I being likable?
Very. I would say middle
Likeable?
class.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And you know, I've had tragedy in my life.
Yes.
Year after year. I've been incredibly unlucky. If you look at my biography,
right.
One tragedy after another. And I've never won an election other than senator from Delaware, but I'm going to bring all my good luck to America. That's what I want to do, is bring all my good luck that I've had in my life to America. Because I'm a lucky guy, and I think luck rubs off on a nation. But Rob Reiner, that's what Rob Reiner told me. And he cares, Rob Reiner. And he directed The Ghosts of Mississippi. Did you see Ghosts of Mississippi?
It was very powerful.
Great movie.
I think I saw some of it on TNT before I was trying to find a basketball game. But yes.
Yeah. That is a movie. Let me just say something to you young people. Rob Reiner directed Ghosts of Mississippi. And that is a movie about, I don't know who the black guy was, but it was something about voting in the South,
right,
and trying to get into his house. Anyway, it's like it really taught me the importance of black people, and we have to something with them. I'm nervous. I can't remember what Ghost of It. I know it was about a black guy, and Alec Baldwin was thin back then. And
you support civil rights in principle.
Civil rights, yes.
Right.
And You know why we have civil rights in this country?
Why?
We went slowly on it.
Right. Well, that was what MLK was about. I mean, and also reaching out to the middle class. That was why he was in Tennessee, to organize the middle class.
Huh?
He was in Tennessee to organize a middle class march.
Yeah, the garbage strike.
Yeah, the rally to restore sanity with Dr. King.
Yes, it's so easy.
Right.
So and what I love as a comedy writer is Dr. Martin Luther King said, incrementalism is a sin. And as a comedy writer, I appreciate his sarcasm. When he said incrementalism is a sin, I go, God, this guy he's using wit and comedy. He's got it. Like he would have killed at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with that kind of stuff.
That actually,
your listeners,
could you imagine though? Everybody's here tonight. Dana Bash is here. BuzzFeed was here, but Facebook changed the algorithm on them. No, I'm just kidding. How's everybody doing?
All right. Well, you know what?
You got any movie recommendations for us, David?
Yeah, everything by Rob Reiner. if Rob Reiner directs, let me tell you something. When it comes to how to live your life, here's a general rule of thumb.
Yes.
Always ask first, what would Rob Reiner do? That's the key to life. What would Rob Reiner do? Would Rob Reiner eat this?
Yes.
Would Rob Reiner approve of this?
I don't know.
Rob Reiner's voting for Biden.
I know, Rob Reiner. Jesus Christ. Rob Reiner really.
I have the perfect running mate. Want to know who I think the perfect running mate for
Biden? Rob Reiner.
I'm sorry?
Rob Reiner.
I wish, but he's got to make more great movies.
Yeah, right.
Like the bucket list.
Who should be Biden's running mate?
Well, I kind of wish maybe we can get like a Kickstarter campaign that raises about $1 million for me to move to Los Angeles and lobby Rob Reiner to run for president. And, if we can get $1 million, I could, set up a 501c3 and pay my kids a salary.
One of the things I like about I would think one of the things I like about your podcast is you really do have a very detailed understanding of how modern politics works, and I think you're demonstrating that in your Kickstarter.
I don't know what. Well, I think I think it's a good use of Kickstarter. But anyway,
I think you should have moved to the right, David. I think you could be headlining CPAC. You're a lot fun. You're much funnier than Dennis Miller. And people might understand what your references are.
I hate those people in principle. And they sicken me. And you saw me. I was at the Javits Center when Hillary lost. And you've seen pictures of me. Yeah, I couldn't get out of bed
for a month.
I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days. I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days when Hillary lost. And I lead with that at parties. People have to know up front that I hate Donald Trump.
Right, of course.
Everybody needs to know that I hate Donald Trump. But that's who I am.
It's a real differentiator. Because there's a lot of people it's a real differentiator because in journalist and entertainment and comedy circles in Manhattan, as an example, you run into a lot of people that like Donald Trump.
Yeah, I hate him.
Yeah,
I hate him.
No.
Oh, I hate that man. Hate him. I always lead with that, especially in Hollywood. When I'm with Rob Reiner, I just go to his cocktail parties and they don't get David started on Donald. Ooh, I hate him. Visceral. It's visceral. Ooh. And then people like me. And then I have to remind people that we have a constitutional crisis.
Right.
And these things only happen every 6 months.
Right. But that somehow we can't do anything about it because Democrats are constitutionally mandated to do nothing. Because we got to win.
Do nothing. No, you're twisting my words to remind us of how great things were once upon a time, right. And that we're better than this. That's the role of Democrats, to tell us who we are. When there's a shooting, anybody can outlaw guns when you're the president. It's on an executive order.
Right.
Taking away the NRA. Obama could have taken away the NRA's tax-exempt status, but he did something more important when that church was shot up. He said, "That's not who we are." And then he sang Amazing Grace. That's
one of the most devastating parts of a Feldman bit, or when it's like, yes, that's literally exactly what happens. Yes.
This is not a bit. This is like, why do you think this is a bit?
I apologize.
Anyway, here's who I think Joe's running mate could be.
Okay, tell me.
Okay.
Yes.
And and this is my being an adult. Okay.
Yes, please.
You know how Joe has listen, Joe has a woman problem. He's not perfect, right?
Sure. So who should his running mate be?
Okay, hear me out.
Okay.
Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete. Now,
wait. How would this solve his woman problem?
Because he's gay. Did you know that Mayor Pete is gay?
I knew that he's gay, and I know that he's a gentrifier and a military guy. That's what I know about Mayor Pete, and he gets it.
Yeah, but he's gay.
Okay,
but he's gay.
Right, so
did you know that he's gay?
Yes, I did know that. Yes.
Okay. And I agree with you. I have a lot of problems with Mayor Pete. Rob Reiner is furious at him for what went on in South Bend. There was something with the African American police chief that he fired, and
yep.
something demolishing black people's houses, something black people being rounded up by it's a Ghost of Mississippi thing, Rob. You should rent the movie. I know I'm swearing. But, he's got a problem with the black people. And believe me, a mayor running a city, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility to be running the fourth largest city in Indiana. I mean, that is, he's up against a lot. So, whatever, something with the blacks.
Isn't there a mayor from Florida who runs a city that's bigger than Mayor Pete, who nobody's paying any attention to? I don't even know the guy's name.
Is he gay?
He's a black man.
Is he gay?
He's an African American man. He's black.
Oh.
So what the hell?
Does he go slowly on things?
I think he does. Well, I think unfortunately I think the problem with him is that he supports fully abolishing ICE. So you guys might not be as excited. That doesn't sound very middle class, I guess.
Oh, I hate ICE. Oh, I stay with Rob Reiner. And I hate it. Ooh. I hate what they're doing. I hate what they're doing to Rob Reiner's cleaning people. I hate them. And
does Rob Reiner have a poster welcoming refugees that he shows to the people that clean and maintain his home? Refugees are welcome here.
He tells the undocumented workers who work for him, I've been there. He said, "Do not talk to ICE. You'll be violating the Logan Act." You cannot talk to foreigners. It's a violation of the Logan Act. And, they're going around. I stay with Rob Reiner when I'm in Hollywood. Right. Not trying to lord my relationship, but, he's got 7 undocumented workers working for him, and we're terrified that they're going to get rounded up for ICE. So what we did on Wednesday was we got them an Uber. A big Uber, and took them. We sprung for an Uber just on Wednesday.
You wanted to make sure because maybe what some people don't know. I don't know if you know, but the Uber and Lyft drivers were striking because the companies have them in an indentured servitude system and they can't make a living, and so they were asking people not to use the services on Wednesday afternoon, and that was the time that you and Rob chose to send his undocumented cleaning people away from his home to evade ICE in an Uber. Do I understand you correctly?
I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying Uber? That's ride sharing. You have a car. It's capital. That's like Uber is socialism. You of all people should know that it's ride sharing. Remember?
Right. Well, I do remember. I think that was the first branding for these services in about like 2013 and 14. Yes.
As a socialist, I can't believe you're putting down Uber. I have a car. You need to go somewhere. I'll share my car with you. It's beautiful, like Airbnb. I'm going to share my home with you. Why would you make fun of that?
Well, I think I'm making fun of it because I think the execution is different than the sales pitch. So you're going through an app. Yeah.
I don't know. You lost me at execution. I'm against capital punishment. So, and
in principle?
No, I'm against capital punishment. I believe.
All right, fair enough.
Let me ask you a question about Uber, though.
Yes.
If Uber's so bad as you say it is, why is Ariana Huffington on the board of directors?
You mean because
Ariana Huffington? Do you know who Ariana Huffington is?
I do. I mean, you do know that there was a lot of controversy at Huffington Post about, not paying people for blog posts, maybe some not great labor practices. It's
work sharing. It's a sharing economy. It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
I believe when people were fired at Huffington Post, I think it was that they were disengaged. Was what they called it. Disengaged.
I think they weren't getting enough sleep, and I think that's what.
You've been reading Ariana's work on the sleep revolution?
I think that Ariana came back to the Huffington Post. She looked around and said, "You know what? You have bags underneath your eyes. You need more sleep. You're fired. Go home and sleep. Hopefully you'll be depressed. You should go into a depression, so you'll just stay in bed all day. And that's the best thing for your health. It's just to be depressed, immobile, have no money, almost like disappear, fall through the cracks so you can just focus on your sleep. That's what Ariana was trying to do for them.
So it was actually,
she didn't make any money off what?
So it was altruistic. So David,
I'm sorry, I
you're
didn't hear what you said.
I said it was altruistic. David, you're we only have like a minute left or so, but I just have to say you're a horrible person. You were like
in
everything.
In principle.
Every single evil tendency of the modern media and Democratic Party and corporate practice, you are embodying, from Rob Reiner to Uber. I mean, Jesus, you're terrible.
You know what?
Joe Biden to Ariana Huffington.
Is this a sarcasm thing that you're doing?
No, I'm not.
Or do you really mean that I'm horrible?
I'm not sophisticated enough to do sarcasm. I speak from the gut.
Do you really think I'm a horrible person?
Middle class. I mean, David.
I'm sorry.
This is horrible. It is. It's horrible.
But I hate Trump. How can I be horrible if I hate Trump? And you know, I talk really loud at Starbucks about the constitutional crisis and pound the table and how I want to punch. Like I hate Bill Barr.
Right, you want to hit him.
I want to punch him. Take him out behind the schoolyard and punch him. How am I a horrible person? The first thing I open with is I hate Trump.
This is becoming so triggering. This is like why I don't watch MSNBC. It's just a bunch of absolutely horrible people who think that recognizing that Donald Trump is a horrible human being is some type of exemplary behavior. What do you want, a cookie?
I love you, man.
I love you so
Matt
much.
Taibbi
Please.
says on your show. I love. Huh?
No, I just got to say to people, please. I don't listen to many podcasts, but I listen to your podcast almost every episode. It's great, and the commentaries, even the bit on Uber. I mean, I know that you just did this really smart insight, like this history of the rideshare scam. You do a commentary, then I mean, what other show are you going to have Ben Burgess and then Jackie the Joke Man Martling on?
By the way, Ben Burgess, before I know we're at it, I love you, man.
I love you too.
Sam, you're the best. But Ben Burgess has really turned me on to Marxism.
Yes.
I owe you for that, so thank you. And, you know, we're all in this together in all seriousness, and I mean this, that, you know, we're all part of the same fabric of the universe. And I've learned that because you've allowed Ben Burgess to come on and my show and teach me about Marxism. So I'm going to ask you for a favor.
Sure.
Don't take this the wrong way. I need exclusivity with Ben. He can only do my show. I think pushing Marxism is a zero-sum game.
Right.
There are winners and losers, and I'm poaching your Marxist professor because I want to be the number one purveyor of Marxism on the internet. I think I can win this way.
Well, I support that in principle.
Thank you.
David Feldman, please. I love you so much.
I love your show. I love Sam's show, and I love your show, and I love when you talk to Professor Richard Wolff and go, so what's the deal with your dad? You ever kick it with them? You still get along with your dad? I love how you probe into their personal life. Get them to talk about their struggles.
He's doing a fucking Marin bit. Yeah, I have Richard Wolff on. I go you study Althusser, but who are your guys? Lenin, man. I tried to read Lenin once after a terrible breakup. I love you, David.
I love you. Thank
right,
you. Let's get coffee or something.
Of course. I'll text you.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Seriously, I'm a big fan.
Next up on the program, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome back to the program John Benjamin, author of the book.
It's a book.
Failure is an Option. Welcome to the program, John.
Thank you so much, Sam.
So, John.
Is it okay if I drink tea?
Sure.
The whole time?
Yes.
I mean, without, as in not talk, just drink tea.
As you know, John, your book, Failure is an Option,
That's so hot.
Now out
can't
in paperback.
Yep.
Originally, it was written in a hardcover form. Prior to that, it was...
Hard, not hard.
And that hardcover came out, when was that, about a year ago?
I think, yeah, it was about a year ago.
And prior to that, it was written in the form of a sitcom script for AMC television that I had actually written.
No.
That was completely unrelated to the book, just coincidentally the name of your book.
Have you never heard the expression failure is not an option?
Well, I mean, prior to my writing a script about
Do you
it...
think anybody ever used the expression failure is an option prior to your use of it for your failed sitcom?
Well, prior to that, the only time I had seen it before then was in regards to an article that was written about me
before,
in the Boston Globe.
Before we resolve that.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said was it's complete fabrication and fallacy and not true. I didn't steal it from you.
I didn't say you stole it. It's interesting that you would say that you stole it, because I didn't say that you stole it.
I'm not here to be prosecuted for a crime I didn't commit, and I don't like your tone, and I think it's not fair. And if I thought you were this was going to be a friendly, proper interview
I started
by
it that way.
a proper podcast on a proper set with proper microphones, and right now I feel like I am being attacked, and I don't need to participate in this type of discourse. So thank you very much, and I'm not leaving.
No, I
but
understand.
Thank you so much.
You're
So we are not done.
very welcome. Let's talk about this book, Failure is an Option.
Yeah.
Now,
You're in it. You're in the book.
Well, that was going to actually going to come up because we had you on the program, and by we, really,
The consortium.
the consortium had you on this program. I don't know when it was. Maybe it was a year ago. Maybe it was when
Probably when the book came out.
the hardcover version of the book came out.
Right.
And I will concede that I had not read it yet because
I assume, like most of the guests you have on, you don't do proper preparation.
Well, in
your
your
interviews.
instance, I was not in any way found the material compelling enough.
When is
to
the
read
last time you had a guest on that wrote a book where you read the book? The whole book.
Ooh.
I mean, you don't have to read a whole book cover to cover to conduct an interview. I'll grant you that. But
Right.
you probably should skim.
Well, I didn't. I'm going to concede now that I didn't even skim your book. I didn't even see the title. Frankly, I just read it off of a piece of paper that somebody gave me. Subsequent to that, after the interview, I accidentally listened to it. Not by my own accord, but I was with someone else who was driving in a car for an extended period of time. We listened to the book.
Who were you with?
Steve.
Steve.
Guy named Steve.
Is he a friend of yours, or is he a professional acquaintance?
Professional acquaintance.
Where did you meet Steve?
At a store.
You met him at a store.
Yeah.
You hadn't known him before.
No, I had not.
It was like a grocery store, or like
It was just a typical retail store.
a Home Depot or a
Sure.
Lowe's.
Very
You
similar.
met. Did
very
he work
similar
there?
to- Part-time.
But you didn't know that at the time.
No.
He
I
wasn't
mean,
wearing like a vest that said Steve, Home Depot.
he actually had a name tag.
Who doing?
Yeah.
It
was not, if I remember correctly, it was not pegged to any type of specific outlet. All right, but that's not the point. The point is, I listened to your book, and I found it interesting. A lot of the things actually sounded very familiar to me.
I bet we've shared a lot of stories.
There was a lot of stories in there that I recognized. In fact, there were a lot of stories that I was a part of. But oddly, my name only came up once in a very ancillary way. But there was at least 2 or 3 stories where I was literally the other person involved that you did not mention my name.
I think probably you're referring to the one where the kid...
I'm referring to multiple aspects of the book.
Okay. I'll tell you the one that I assume you're referring to. The kid who tried to beat me up for a year.
Well, that I don't really remember that story.
In junior high school. The bully.
The bully.
I didn't even... maybe I referred to him as the bully or the asshole.
Or
the fat kid.
Right. That's possible.
I didn't name you by name, but I think like any number one of those... yeah.
Well, let's go through some of these chapters because off the top of my head,
then the other one would be the Midnight Pajama Jam story.
Well, okay, all right. So I'm glad.
Were you named?
Yeah, exactly. I was named in the Midnight Pajama Jam for a performance piece that I did with my Cavs.
Yes, but I mentioned you. Like, I have to say, I'll give myself a ton of credit for mentioning you in a good light, whereas I did not mention you in any of the other stories, which would have painted you in a bad light because you would have been the one in the story that was always mean to me.
That's interesting that you say that because I'd like to go through, and I don't understand how you did these chapter titles. They seem completely unhelpful in terms of how I failed at pretty much everything as a kid. I just don't have the right thing here. I don't.
So you're reading it wrong. But then you showed a good example of how you were to me always just now.
Well, I guess my point is that, wow, there's a lot of failures in option books. Boy, you really... I'm looking this up here, and it's unbelievable. There's one written by Philip Van Son.
Philip Van Son.
There's another one about mission control. No, that's failures. Not
that would be problematic,
right.
But that's probably true, right?
Well, I mean, for instance, the story of the script you wrote.
Space program.
The script you wrote with your friend.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great story.
Yeah, that was a good story.
Yeah, that was a great story.
But you were only like peripherally involved.
I was the co-writer of the script.
That's true. You probably helped. I probably did most of it.
I think I pitched it and went...
It was my idea. You were against it.
No, it was my idea.
No.
I specifically know where I got that idea.
No.
It was from going down with Mark Morris to his grandmother's house in Boynton Beach.
Oh, the show might have been your idea, but the story was my idea.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The story was your idea, but I was there the entire time. Why don't you tell people just briefly what we're talking about?
The summary of the story was that you probably got a script deal to write a sitcom script. I don't think you came up with the idea.
No, I did come up with the idea, but I think we probably pitched it together.
Okay. Which was a story about...
Conan O'Brien's company.
Yep. Was about 2 young guys who, down in their luck, right, unemployed friends who...
Go visit their grandmother or one of their grandmothers.
And then decide that they could live cheaply in the gated community in which their grandmother lived.
The retirement home, right? Early retirement, I think is what we called it. And then...
And after that, shows, I think, have been made.
Oh, of course.
A show has been made with that premise.
Of course.
And the story in my book was you and I went...
Not you and I. The story is you
my friend,
and some nameless
my friend
person.
And I.
Right.
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 My friend and
Subject
I went...
A, right? Or something.
My friend and I went down to Florida.
Right. To
my brother-in-law's father and mother's gated community.
Right. It's interesting to me that you get so specific about brother-in-law because that's a specific person as opposed to the way that I was addressed in that, which is just like
friend.
Another guy.
No.
Random guy.
Did I say friend?
Maybe.
Well, pull it up.
Okay.
I bet it says like...
Who knows?
It doesn't say like a guy and I went...
All
It
right,
does
but
not
go
say a guy and I went to Florida together.
All right. Well, fair enough. Keep going with the story.
It probably says a friend, which
Okay.
is probably a proper terminology, just like a
I mean,
brother-in-law.
it really wasn't just. I wasn't going as a friend. It was a professional. The whole story is about a professional story, right? It's like you were commissioned. It wasn't like you were commissioned to do a script and you brought along a friend.
It was. I probably said my friend and I were writing a script. I just didn't name you.
Right. And then what happened?
What happened in the story?
Well, maybe it was very just peripheral that I was involved in it. But go ahead. Let's see what the rest of the story.
So then the story was we went down, and when we met the parents, my friend and I, when we met them, I had an idea that I proposed to my friend because my brother-in-law's father, nice Jewish man, was telling us stories about how he wrote the annual play that was put on by the community.
Yeah.
And they were like musicals or parodies, I'm trying to think of what they were. They were literal examples.
Yeah.
It was like Jewish jokes,
right?
Place pun in that.
I'm trying to think of something from like Oklahoma or something like that. Like, oh,
well,
right.
They would be. You're right. Yeah,
right.
It would be like
something
matzo ball soup,
matzo ball soup, and right.
Guys and matzo ball soup.
Right, exactly.
Dolls.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a good example. All right, so he when I think we were out to a Chinese
Annie
food.
would have been like Franny or something like that. But anyways, good.
There's examples in the book. I think I remember because he sent them to me.
Mm-hmm. To us.
I have his work. He's passed away, and I have his place.
No, I know.
So
I was
there. We went out to eat with him at a Chinese food buffet, and I think proposed the idea at the buffet.
I remember
with
that.
you saying we should, instead of writing it ourselves, pay out of a portion of our money the brother-in-law's father, to write the whole script.
And then turn it in.
as
a joke.
As our work.
But as a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, because we went on to write the script.
We did.
Right.
Well, we wrote after he wrote it.
Well, we wrote it simultaneously. We handed in the...
Oh, did we?
Yes.
I forgot that in the story.
Well, yeah. You also forgot to mention
I remember
that
the friend.
I was the other guy.
remember the friend.
Right.
It was you.
Just general friend.
It was you.
I mean, it's just weird to read these stories.
And then you recorded the phone call we had with David Kissinger.
That's right.
The son of Henry Kissinger.
That's
who's
correct.
Head of Conan O'Brien's production company, who had to give us notes on that old Jewish man's
and A.J.
script.
Morowitz, I think. And I just remember them saying, we feel like you wrote what you thought would be funny to us. And what we want is you to write what you think is funny to you. And we were like, really?
And it was like 65 or 70 pages.
Yeah.
I remember. And 12
to be like
12 pages of it.
pages.
12 pages of it was pulled, I think, directly from a Yiddish joke book. So he wrote that was in the book, in the story as well. He wrote
no, there was incredible detail.
Right. It was like all the
Put into
characters
the
in a
story.
room, and then Harold enters, and then a
Right.
joke book joke
Right.
by one character. Then next character, Stuart, joke book joke.
Right. I mean, it was amazing to me that you could actually name the characters in the script that he wrote, but not the other guy
Those
who
were
was
made
involved
up.
in the story.
I'm just assuming Harold and Stuart. Those were not the characters. I'm sure.
Well, I understand, but my point being
Morty
that was.
and
I mean, it was just weird to hear that as I'm with Steve in the car and have to go, oh, that's me. And he's like,
where were you and Steve going?
Driving somewhere. I don't remember. Probably a long trip.
So you often travel with him?
No, that was it. That was the last time. It was so uncomfortable when I had to say oh, and that's me.
So you listened to my book on tape with Steve?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. It was awkward. It was just awkward. And I just thought, Here's
what did Steve say? Because
he said this is awkward. I don't.
why
how would I
Steve
know?
say that was awkward? Wouldn't Steve?
Well, because I keep
like,
saying he said. Well, I don't understand. Why
so I
didn't
assume you were like, "This is me. That story. That's me. I'm not even named."
I didn't get that exercised until
And then
like
what
the
would Steve
third or
say?
fourth.
Why was Steve mad?
Hold
Wouldn't he
on
be
for 1
like,
second.
why are you so worked up?
You gonna let me answer your question?
Well, if I were Steve, I'd be like, I'm driving. I can't like.
Well, what makes you think Steve?
And
was
you're
driving?
like, what the fuck?
Wait.
This story's about me. I'm in this story and not even named.
Okay, you got to turn. You just got to. First of all,
And then Steve's trying to drive.
listen. Who said Steve was driving?
You said you were on a trip with Steve driving.
I didn't say he was driving.
You were driving.
We switched off. Because frankly, by the third or fourth time in the book, when that happened, in separate stories, other stories, I became a little distressed, yes. And by the time the Midnight Pajama Jam came along,
Where you were named.
where I mentioned for like as a like it's a subsidiary, it's a completely like why in that story you could have just said, oh, and there was some guy who had calves, as opposed to in the story where I'm there in like the entire thing.
I mean, it would have been awkward, I guess.
So,
right?
well, Steve said this is awkward because why would he name you in that one, but not these other ones? And then that's the last time that Steve and I hung out.
So you mean, do you think that the...
But here is my question, John.
Wait, let me... Do you think that Steve was taken aback by the way he reacted? Or do you think that
No.
you never talked because... I'm saying, do you think Steve felt like...
Steve thought I was lying.
No. I'm saying, do you feel like Steve felt like, I don't like this guy, or I don't like trust this guy. He's not the person I met at the store. Now he's like, all of a sudden we're listening to an audiobook and he's yelling about how I'm in it. And Steve is like, did you even tell him that you knew me?
Steve,
Before
by
you
the
put
end,
on my audiobook?
Steve, by the end, I didn't put on the audiobook.
Steve put it on.
Yeah.
That even makes it worse.
Well, it was super uncomfortable because
Yeah, because if I were Steve,
Steve was like, this doesn't make sense. Why would he name you here and not the other places? I think you're lying about the other places. That's my whole point. John, here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
The paperback is out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you correct that?
Did I correct? Did I name
Yes. Did you go back, realize that it was a mistake, and fix it?
No, not in the way that you assume. I did redact your name from the Midnight Pajama Jam story. So I took out the one mention of you that was in the book because I felt like, I don't know, maybe you were right when you were with Steve. But I didn't even know it. I just took out your name out of spite because I didn't even want you mentioned.
Well, I think in many respects that would have been easier to deal with. Because then he probably would have been like, oh, well, that guy's not going to mention you anywhere. That's weird. He's a weird guy. As opposed to like, I don't know if I believe you. Why would he mention you here and not in the other places?
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is that you're probably going to really enjoy my next book, which is entitled Sam Cedar is a Complete Asshole.
Really? That's you. So that was my next question. What's next for you?
Well, there you go. I mean, there will be tons of stories about you and who you are and how I know you as a person.
You already wrote them. You wrote them in the first book. You just didn't name me. So you're just going to basically rewrite
maybe
the
some
same.
of the stories will be repeated with you named.
All right. Fair enough. Now, let me ask you this, John. Mm-hmm. Some people have asked this question. Have you gotten in trouble for some of the things that you revealed in that book? Have any of the people, some of whom I do know, have they in any way come back to you and said, hey.
Like legally?
Well, legally or
There's
even
nothing
socially?
really in the book that I was worried about.
Well, I mean, at one point you...
I was a little bit worried about a couple of things.
What were the things you were worried about?
There was a story about a threesome.
I remember that story.
I didn't want to mention who was in it.
I know.
I mean, I was in it.
Right?
You were actually a part of that story, too, and I did not name you.
You did not.
You were not in the threesome.
I was not in the threesome. I do remember
you were almost as much in the threesome as I was, to the extent that I think I came and told you about it.
Do you think
during it?
The funnier, I do remember you actually.
I left the threesome to tell you that I'm in the middle of a threesome right now.
I do remember going like, "What are you? What?"
Well, for people listening or watching, that the college we went to was pretty small.
Yes.
So you could have a threesome in one dorm and quickly run across the quad.
Again, it could still be going
and
on.
Alert your friend and come back.
Yeah.
And continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly based upon,
which is actually what happened.
Particularly based upon the amount of involvement that you had. But people haven't read this.
It's
much better just to watch your appearance on Colbert to talk about it than
That's
the
true.
actual writing of the book.
And most people who read the book said the same thing.
Said the Colbert.
Said just like I bought the book based on the Colbert appearance, and then I was like, oh, I didn't really like their book.
No, people
like the
did
appearance
not say
was
that.
really good.
People did not say that.
Oh, some people did.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer writing it or voicing it?
The book?
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy writing it, but voicing it was not that fun either. So, it's hard to read your own stuff if you don't like it.
Right.
And there was no way out of. I tried to get out of reading it, I think, but it made no sense because I'm predominantly known for what I read or reading aloud.
What do you mean?
Like for my voice work.
What?
Oh, I'll tell you about it later.
It sounds like something that you would have pitched to them to have hired someone else to pretend they were you reading it. That would have been really
I think
obvious.
I pitched a couple ideas, like an old lady or
right.
a 7-year-old or something. Yeah.
I'm almost shocked.
And I think it probably got down to it's in your contract that you have to read it because it's the only reason we hired you to write it.
I can't help but think that you probably
we didn't even care what you wrote. It's just you just read whatever you want. Now, it could have been nonsense, and it might have been better.
Well, let's talk about your voice work, John.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that there is a Bob. You for those people who don't know, you are the voice of Archer on the program Archer.
Yep.
You're also the voice of Bob
on the program
Bob's Burgers,
which you're on.
On occasion.
Yeah.
My understanding is that there is a movie that has been announced. It'll be released in 2020. Am I a part of that?
I mean, I haven't heard your name brought up yet. As far as casting goes, it's not really my purview. I assume you could do what you normally would do and inappropriately reach out to people.
Well, I think that's in part what I'm doing now, isn't it?
Yeah. And force yourself on them in the way that you sometimes do for a lot of things.
Well, I feel like that's what I'm doing at this moment.
You want me to reach out for you?
Well, I'm reaching out to you to put some pressure on. I mean, the idea that the star of the show
I would think
would have no influence on bringing back an extremely popular character who was in the pilot episode. It's almost hard to believe.
No, I mean, I'm not saying I don't have a lot of influence in casting decisions. I probably, if I wanted to, I could probably go directly to the creator of the show and bring up your name.
Right.
And say, remember that character from season 1 or whatever.
Well, it wasn't just season 1. I think you'll find it was not just in season 1.
Yeah, and I could definitely do that, and I have done that with other people, frequently have said oh, you should hire, and on every occasion where I have done that, it has happened.
Good.
Yeah. I just don't know whether I'm going to do that yet.
All right. Fair enough. Let me ask you this, John. You've been on Archer for what now? 8 years? 9 years?
I did just think about it, and no, I'm not going to do that.
All right.
I don't think I'm going to contact the creator about that.
Well, you know what? You don't need to make a decision right now.
Well,
so you can just think about it a little bit more.
Okay. I mean, I think I just did, but I think
you thought about it, but I'm saying you could think about it
Sure, of course
more.
I could rethink it.
I'm not saying rethink it. I would just say don't even complete the...
No, like I said, you brought it up. I thought about it. I said I declined. And then you said rethink it. And
Well, let's just table that for now, shelve that, come back to it later at a different time then.
I mean, that would be a big opportunity for you to
I mean, it probably would. It probably would. John, you've been on Archer now for how long?
10 years.
10 years. And how long have you been on Bob's Burgers?
About 10 years, I think.
Are you going to do anything new or anything that's in any way challenging? I mean, just as a
I don't know. Would you like?
Excuse me. Let me finish my question. As an actor, as an artist, do you ever feel like I'm just resting on my laurels because I've been doing the same thing for so long, and I just show up and talk into a microphone? And
That seems somewhat ironic based on you being here, but
what do you mean?
Let me ask what you're doing, but I don't know. Like, I would say no. I still enjoy it as much as I did at the very beginning, and
so no new challenges.
And I don't know whether
go through the motions.
Would you go up to like President Barack Obama in year 7 and say, "Do you still enjoy doing this thing that you're doing?"
I think that's a valid question.
Are you gonna maybe just stop now?
Well, I mean, he has 2 terms. You've actually gone beyond that.
Well,
and I'm just asking, as an
artist,
artist,
but
as
you
an artist,
understand the analogy.
As an artist, do you miss having anything that's challenging or new?
Would
or
you
fresh?
go approach Pablo Picasso and say, like, "Are you still going to do the painting thing?"
Well, I think Picasso
or the sculpture thing that you're doing,
would
or
challenge
maybe you
himself.
want to
That's
make
why
a movie, or branch out, or do something else.
Well, I mean, even just do a different character. I mean, for God's sakes.
Well, I play several characters on the show.
Well, there's no reason to get defensive about it.
I'm fine. I mean, I did rethink that thing we were talking about earlier again, and I'm going to actually double down and say that no, definitely not going to contact the creator of the show to help you out.
Well, like I say, we have a lot of time, John. You don't need to.
Well, that's
do
like
that.
Twice now that I've rethought it, and I feel like that's like probably like.
Is failure is an option? Is that available widely, or is it just being put out in a narrow situation?
I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in Barnes and Noble. Are you familiar?
I didn't. To be honest with you, I did not know that they were still around.
They are.
Okay.
They're still brick and mortar Barnes and Nobles, I believe. I bet you can get it online on Amazon.
Interesting.
Or one of your an Audible.
Mm-hmm.
The book version.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where else you can get it.
John, why no YouTube channel for you? You have a lot of YouTube videos around. I went back the other day and I watched baby pranks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's still on YouTube.
It's still on YouTube. I don't think you.
Well, I would be like, I would have to like make new content, and that's I
guess that was sort of my point.
Well, I'm like, I would say one day every 2 weeks doing the Bob character. I am also one day every 2 months doing the Archer character.
And that must get exhausting.
So where do you fit in time to do a YouTube channel?
Right.
I mean, it's something that you told me to do a long time ago, and I never did it.
Right.
But all those videos are very old, and I haven't necessarily made new ones.
They're all in 4x3.
Really?
Yeah.
You can thank Bill Buckendorf.
Well, I mean, who knew where things were going?
What is the new format?
The new format is 3x5, basically, or what is the new format? 7 by I can't remember. 8 by 6 by 8 by I don't know. 8 by 10s.
I mean, like, what would I do?
12 by
honestly, what would I do? Like, a YouTube channel would have to be like what YouTube is now, which is like what you do. Just like filler, right? Well, like just as someone talking for an hour. That's like what my kid watches.
Okay.
I mean, I could do that. I could like play a video game.
Well, there's a lot of people who do that.
Mm-hmm.
Matt wants to do that.
You do that.
I'm looking to get into it in the future.
As in, like, shoot yourself in an inset box playing a video game.
Yep.
Yeah. My kid would watch you.
Yeah.
It's great. Anything else interesting, John, going on with you?
Is there a park around here that has a rhinoceros sculpture?
Maybe.
I heard there was.
It's interesting. Interesting question. Anything else? Live performances where people can see you? Is there a web? You don't even have a website, do you?
No. What do you mean? I have a job. I mean, I have a job. I don't need a website. I have a job.
Well, do you perform live? Is there places people can see you live?
Do you go up to your postman and say, like, you have a website?
A lot of postmen do.
Do you go to your the guy in your building, the super, and say, like, do you have a website I can take a look at?
Well, I mean,
he has a job. He's doing something.
I talk to a lot of performers and comedian types.
Mm-hmm.
They all have websites, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it just because you said so, and I'm not doing it just because they do.
All right. Well, there you have it. John Benjamin, stuck in the past, ladies and gentlemen, refusing to move into the future. Nevertheless, they put out a paperback book and an audio version. I imagine there's a Kindle version. Does that bother you?
Why? Oh, because it's technology. It's
like
advanced technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy reading on a Kindle. I mean, I don't have a Kindle, but I don't enjoy reading on my phone or my computer, if that's what you're getting at.
No. So failure is an option.
Mm-hmm.
They re-released it. Does in that way cut against a little bit about the premise of the book, John? Lastly?
I mean, I'm not sure it's a total success, but they did make it a paperback.
So perhaps a sequel? Moderate success is also an option. That's just a...
Success is not an option?
No, moderate success is an option.
Right. Or success is an option.
Or success is an option.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, feel free to take that. It's not like you needed my permission anyways.
Well, feel free to re-pitch that show that didn't go, that you still probably have, called Failure is an Option. Because they passed on it.
Well,
so feel free to try
AMC
and
did
resell
not go
it
into
again.
Comedy. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't foresee you being on Bob's Burgers anytime soon.
Great. Well, I've got a lot of other things to do. In fact, we're going to have to move on with this show. So,
thanks for having me.
See yourself out.
Do I have to leave right now? I can't get up because I went poo-poo in my pants.
Quick break. We'll be right back after this.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.